Hello everybody, welcome to this session on measuring access to different cooking solutions. The survey collects information to calculate access to improved cooking as a binary yes-no variable as well as in a multi-tier framework. The first way of measuring access requires few questions, whereas the latter requires most of the questions in the household questionnaire section I. It doesn't take many questions to seek out the binary access variable. Households are asked about their type of stove and fuel in the first part of section I. The communities are asked if improved stoves are available in the community questionnaire in section I, question 1 to 9. This table shows the 6 dimensions for cooking used in the multi-tier approach. The 6 tiers used for each dimension and a brief explanation in each cell for what it takes to define them. Obviously, it takes many more questions to calculate access in the multi-tier framework compared to the binary SDG indicator. The modules I and J on access to household cooking solutions in the questionnaire is where we find the questions. Tier 0 define the lowest level and Tier 5 the highest. The final tier of access is determined by the lowest level for any of the 6 dimensions. You don't need to get a deep understanding of this table. We just want to give you the idea of how the information we collect are going to be used. For those interested in learning more, we can share a more detailed explanation in a separate document. The ideal approach to measure emissions for each type of oven is too demanding for a survey. Hence, for the current project, as well as for other national projects, a proxy system has been designed. The 6 attributes are as follows. Cooking exposure captures how exposed the members of the households are to the emission from the fuel when cooking. Cook stove efficiency measures efficiency in use of the fuel. Efficient cook stoves use less energy to deliver a given amount of usable heat compared to traditional 3-stone open fire stoves. Convenience is related to the time and effort involved in securing, processing, and using the different energy sources. That includes acquiring the fuel for the stove. Safety of primary stove is linked to the risk of injury related to the cooking stoves. Affordability defines whether the cooking solution is affordable for the household. Fuel availability captures whether the primary fuel used for cooking is available throughout the year. To estimate cooking exposure, the first step is to determine the tier for emissions for a household based on its main stove. Each stove that a household uses is classified based on a combination of the stove design and the primary fuel used with that stove. The second step is to determine the ventilation for the cooking area, categorized by the location of the cooking activity. Ventilation mitigates the indoor air pollution that a household is exposed to by diluting the concentration of emission from polluting fuels and expelling the pollutants from the cooking area. It is based on the size of the room used for cooking, the ventilation, and the number of windows and doors in the room. The third step is to determine the contact time, which is based on the questions about the time it takes to cook meals. Based on these 3 aspects, the overall classification for cooking exposure is defined into one of the 6 tiers. Cook stove efficiency includes combustion and heat transfer efficiency. Cook stoves that use less energy to deliver a given amount of usable heat compared to traditional 3-stone open fire stoves and meet a specified efficiency standard are placed in high tiers. Direct measurement is difficult, Thus, rough and conservative estimates are adopted based on cookstove type. The general approach is, for every country, to identify typical cookstoves being commonly built on site or available for purchase at the local market, and identify similar cookstoves already tested in a lab and listed in a global database of cookstoves with performance data. Thus, this dimension will be identified based on the information on type of cookstove and fuel in the household. The classification of convenience is based upon time used to collect or purchase fuel and time for preparing the cookstove for each meal. The questionnaire therefore collects information on how many members that collect or purchase fuel and how much time they have to do so, as well as how much time it takes in a week. That's question I-43 to I-45. In addition, the survey asks about how much time household members spend preparing the stove and fuel for each meal on average. Question I-34. Based on a combination of these two, the time it takes to get the fuel and the time it takes to prepare the stove, a TIA classification is given for the convenience dimension. Safety of the cooking solution refers to possible injury during use and is determined based on an evaluation of the cookstove design with regard to equipment stability, sharp edges, exposes hot surfaces, fuel containment, and similar factors. In the absence of clear information about laboratory evaluation results, the safety attribute of the primary cookstove in a household is assessed based on past experiences of accidents. Questions used are I-41, if anybody in the household faced any harm or injury from the stove, and I-42, if they seeked professional medical assistance for this injury. The multi-TIA framework considers that cooking is affordable if the levelized cost of a cooking solution is less than 5% of household income. The affordability of energy access has two underlying factors: the cost related to cooking solution, which is a characteristic of the energy cooking solution, and the income level of the user. The levelized costs are calculated based on information on fuel type and the actual fuel cost in the households. Household income per year is proxied by summing up all consumption components in the consumption module. We only ask information on availability for primary fuel. Availability of the cooking fuel may be an issue for a variety of reasons, depending on the type of fuel. For example, availability of solid fuels, such as wood or agricultural residues, may vary with season. Fuel availability is covered by asking if fuel is always available or available for some specified months. In addition to the questions related for calculating the TIAs for each dimension, some information is collected to understand barriers and drivers to use of improved stoves. These questions aim to understand: what is the average cost of setting up and use different cooking solutions, and what is the willingness to pay for improved stoves? There are also questions on attitudes, like, for example, whether households think food prepared on open fire tastes differently than when prepared on improved stoves. Further, there are questions about whether they received any training related to improved stoves, and the community questionnaire asks about campaign in the community. All these questions will help us understand how a shift towards improved solution can take place. Thank you for your attention.